All right, guys, welcome back to the Conviction Fiction. And this is a live episode. So if you've been rocking with me for a while, you already know we don't sugarcoat anything here. And if you're new, well, you came to the right place because today we're talking about something raw, something real, something that affects way too many people, and that's addiction, incarceration, and the fight to break free. Now, when we're talking about breaking free, we're not talking about like getting out of prison, right? Most of the people that are incarcerated will be released. So it's very important for us to realize that, some of those things that you were doing beforehand, they need to stop, like being addicted to alcohol or illegal drugs. I can remember the first time I sat in a cell, staring at the walls, wondering how I end up in this place. I told myself it was just bad luck. I made a wrong decision. Um, Most of us say we were in the wrong place at the wrong time. But the truth is, a little bit harder to admit. It wasn't just one bad decision; it was a cycle, and that cycle was fueled by pain, just being in survival mode, by things I thought that I had control over, things that you had control over, but we really didn't. All right, so I don't have any guests today. It's just going to be me, my story, and the hard lessons I had to learn the hard way because breaking free isn't just about getting out of prison, like I said. It's about breaking the mindset, the habits, the cycle that keeps pulling us back. Now, one of the habits I had prior to incarceration was illegal drug use. I used to like getting high. I used to like getting drunk. And, if I wanted to stay out and avoid recidivism, this is something that I needed to address. I need to address the habit, right? Because that habit was going to keep pulling me back into a vicious cycle. So we're going to talk about it. And let's get real. And maybe, just maybe, we can change the narrative. Okay. So with today, let's talk about the connection between drug use and incarceration. Um, Substance abuse can lead to criminal behavior and imprisonment. I know many of y'all don't believe it. Maybe you just it's like, oh, I just did it to get high or to have fun or whatnot. But most times, if you really think about it, even in your case or a scenario of your family or friends or something like that, um, substance abuse led to the criminal behavior. Whether it was you had to commit criminal behaviors just to get more substances, right? Or you wanted substances from someone and you decided to go take them. You needed the money for it. A lot of times that's what happens. And, I want to dispel that. I mean, okay, marijuana. We'll talk about that in one of the later episodes. But, marijuana is one of those legal things now and is actually proven to be something that is beneficial for a lot of people, especially those dealing with trauma, dealing with chronic diseases, dealing with depression, things of that nature. But we're talking about some of the other illicit drugs. Fentanyl is heavy out right now, one of the most dangerous opioids out there. Then they putting so much stuff in it now that you don't even know if you get anything pure. It's like back in the day, and now it's coming up. Cocaine was, and it still is a pretty popular drug, but people would try to stretch it so much that you really was only getting a fraction of what you thought was cocaine, and you was getting other chemicals and stuff like that, which um, pretty much led to mandatory sentences when it came to people being locked up. I can remember back in 1996, the omnibus crime bill passed by Bill Clinton, Hillary Clinton, and a bunch of Democrats and Republicans stood by this, and it introduced mandatory minimums. Now, those mandatory minimums were legislative established penalties that set fixed terms of imprisonment for specific offenses. Most of them were drug related crimes. And these policies were introduced with the intent to deter drug use and distribution by imposing uniform severe punishment. It's like mandatory five. You get caught with so many grams or whatever, mandatory five. You got with so many more ounces or grams, then it was 15 years or 20 years. However, over time, they have significantly influenced the landscape of the U.S. criminal justice system. Basically, it packed the prisons up with the mandatory minimums. It packed the prisons, and then of course, um, we had the long-standing debate of okay, locking up drug offenders um, for life or for multiple years. Of how does that help when they only sold drugs? And for the most part, like for instance with marijuana, it is now a legal drug in most of the states. So you had all of these factors that contributed to an overcrowded prison system. And of course, once the prison system started getting overcrowded, you got more violence, you got more um, hate, you got more, health issues, you got a lot of different stuff going on when there are crowded prisons. Okay. Um, then eventually got to start letting people out. Right. Now, the impact on the incarceration rates, because that's what I was just mentioning a minute ago, those mandatory minimums led to a substantial increase in incarceration rates for drug offenses. For instance, here's a fact: between 1980 and 2005, the number of individuals incarcerated for drug related crimes surged by 1,000%. I didn't say 100. Drug related crimes, because of these crime bills and because of these mandatory minimums, drug related crimes surged by 1,000%. By 2016, drug offenders constituted nearly half of the federal prison population, with 72% of these individuals convicted of offenses carrying mandatory minimums. So most of the prison population, almost half of the prison population in 2016 were drug offenses. And 72% of those, nearly all of them, were convicted of offenses carrying mandatory minimums. Okay, and that was from the criminal defense lawyer outfit down in Miami. The U.S. Sentencing Commission, because I'm not making this up. These are facts. Mandatory minimums also contributed to pronounced sentencing disparities, especially along racial lines. We're not a racial show. We acknowledge racism. However, you cannot argue with the facts. The Anti-Drug Abuse Act of 1986 established a 100-to-1 sentencing disparity between crack and powder cocaine offenses, meaning possession of 5 grams of crack cocaine triggered the same mandatory minimum sentence as someone that had 500 grams of powder cocaine. So you had dudes that had 5 grams of crack that were sentenced to mandatory minimums as someone that had 500 grams of powder cocaine. Now, this policy disproportionately affected the African American communities, the Black communities, our culture, leading to significant racial imbalances in incarceration rates. That's why there's more Black people, and still to this day, it's a lot more Black people or people of color locked up than people that are non-Black, right, or non-color, like white people, right? So I think that's something that needs to be addressed, and we need to be aware of that, especially when we are talking about how significantly drugs or substances played in our own incarceration. I was talking with some guys the other day, and we have our little round tables or whatnot, and what I found out is that I kind of run with not necessarily crooks, but people that are convicts, people that are doing well, people are, but they know the game. They've been to prison or had extended sentences at one point in time, and we supported like a support group and not, illegal activities going. We all got families or whatnot. But for the most part, all of us were at some point dealing with drugs, whether using or selling or abusing drugs or alcohol. Going back to the sentencing part of it, in 2010, the Fair Sentencing Act of 2010 reduced this disparity to 18-to-1. And then concerns about racial inequities, they're always going to persist. So, what does the research say? What does the research say when it comes to mandatory minimums? What does that say? I mean, we're locking up these people. At one point, we were locking up someone that had 5 grams of crack and sentencing them to the same mandatory minimum that someone had of 500 grams of powder cocaine. Now, the research indicates that mandatory minimums have limited to no effectiveness in deterring drug use and related crimes. Right? Um, I've been locked up before. Uh, there are drugs in the prisons, which, basically, how do they get there? How do they get there if there are drugs in the prison? We're isolated. We're not in the free world. So that might be something that we need to talk about on a criminal reform show or one of those shows wherein we dig into the criminal justice system and how they actually promote violence within the prison system. How some, I'm not saying all, but some promote drug use. Some of the staff or administration, they actually want violence. They want those things to happen so that they, I guess, keep a job or to prove that they can lay down the law when they want to. But that's a whole different story, because mandatory sentences did not or have not been effective in deterring drug use, especially when you can go to prison and still get drugs. Now, a study by the Rand Corporation concluded that these sentences are not justifiable based on cost effectiveness for reducing cocaine consumption or any drug related crime. Now, I know we're talking about cocaine a lot, but this also goes over into the fentanyl or the opioid epidemic. All of that kind of plays a part in what this topic is about. And we're talking about breaking the cycle. Right? We got to break the cycle in the close relationship with substance abuse, incarceration, and recidivism. Okay. Now, I've done a lot of studies. I've been in a lot of treatment programs and things of that nature. So most of it, from my experience, treatment programs for users are more cost effective than mandatory minimums. And I say that because with these treatment programs, that means if you're caught with drugs or you have a drug related crime, because most of them are drug related. Most crimes that happen because someone was either high or it was some kind of drugs, especially in urban areas. I would say that in the city areas and stuff like that, even in some of the suburban areas, drugs are almost always involved because they are substances that change your mental mind state. Right? You don't think rationally. Maybe you're using drugs to actually deal with some type of pain or trauma. Maybe you're using the drugs because of peer pressure. Everyone else is doing it, so I need to do it. I don't feel good about myself enough that I can't like just function without them. So I'm going to take them to make me feel better. But nearly all treatment programs for heavy users are cost effective, better than the mandatory minimums. That helps in both decreasing both the drug consumption and associated criminal activity. Now, when it comes to recidivism and rehabilitation, there are a couple of challenges that we have, because longer sentences resulting from those mandatory minimums do not necessarily lead to lower recidivism rates. Just because you've been locked up for 10 years mandatory or 15 years on a mandatory minimum, that doesn't mean that you won't come right back, especially if there aren't any programs or some deprogramming within the prison system to help you understand that you can't commit crimes. If you do commit crimes, you're going to jail. Right? I just believe that most of us, and I've talked about this on other podcasts, most of us didn't know how to live anyway. Right? So when we talk about rehabilitation, We basically need to be habilitated. Right? We need to learn how to live first because we didn't know how to live. Now, a lot of the lessons that men about family, friends, or even the streets that taught us, you know, and I have an interesting point of view on this. All right. So here's the thing. If you uh didn't have parents or unfortunate enough that you grew up in a broken home, right? At some point, I think a decision has to be made wherein you can either decide that this broken home is going to define me and I'm going to continue making broken homes, or I'm going to continue this vicious cycle, or you can decide, like, I really didn't like how that made me feel. I really didn't like having no one to go to or turn to. So I'm going to become the one that people can turn to. I'm going to foster a community or atmosphere of sharing, of not being a victim to like what I grew up on. Right. So when we talk about habilitation, it's very important to realize that no matter if you had a mandatory minimum, you're in prison or and then you are out. You can easily come back, especially if you haven't learned anything. Okay. Did you know that over 2/3 of individuals released from prison got rearrested within 3 years? 2/3. Right. So 100 people got let out of prison. We're going to say like 66% of them, or 66 out of that 100 went back. And my thing of it is, I preach this a lot. Extending incarceration can hinder reintegration efforts, making it more challenging for individuals to access things like employment, getting a good education and treatment opportunities upon their release. Because you've been gone so long, if there are not any programs within the prison system to teach you or help you understand, like, life has changed, life has went on, despite you being incarcerated. Things are changing, laws are changing. So if there aren't programs within the system that kind of carries you along to recognize these changes, to see those changes, then I don't care. Being locked up longer does not help you. Does not help you when you're out, unless there are some programs available that, what we say, got you into the street, right? You know what's going on out there. You know how hard it is to get housing. You know what the job market looks like out there, right? The job market is tough for people that are free citizens now. There are millions and millions of people unemployed, right? Now, how does it help that you let someone out after doing, I don't know, 28 years, 15 years, right? You let them out and they're going into a job market, but they have no education. They don't have any skills. They don't have any trade or anything that can actually put them over the top of someone that has been out here working, that has a resume, that has like work experience and stuff, right? So those treatment opportunities upon release, they are limited, right? You got to go. I mean, there are some people doing some great things out here. Shout out to Teens on Point. If you're listening, shout out to Dream Builders Foundation, Break the Chains. One more question. Dr. Travis Barber doing this thing here in the Atlanta area. Want to also give a special shout out to Dr. Terrence Berry with Focus 21 Foundation, and April Polk of AP Rose Entertainment. Start looking for her new show, The Queenables and The Kingables. Should be out soon, which follows the life of people that are out here. So like a reality TV show, and then it shows how people have to deal with getting employment, finding educational opportunities, and treatment once they're released, especially after long bids. Now, the public, it depends on who's in office. I'm not trying to make this a political thing, but public support for stringent mandatory minimums has waned over time, and then they come right back strong. First, people like, hold up, there's too many people in prison. Why are there in so many people in prison? Especially the mandatory minimums. That's the reason. And so you start seeing an ease in the legislation. You start seeing parole boards start granting people parole or earlier release. And then what happens? Crime goes back up, right? You have a politician, they jump on TV. Well, this person committed this crime. He just did 15 years for that, for a drug offense. And now he just got out and did another crime. We need to lock him up, right? We need to lock everyone back up. And then that's when those mandatory minimums kind of kick back in. So it's all about the political thing about it we're in, how the justice system is being perceived, and what are some of the programs that are being offered within the justice system. All of that is, I know it seems like a lot of pressure, but if you have been locked up before, it depends on you to not do or become a victim of that thing called recidivism. Now, there are some surveys that indicate that a minority of voters, a very small minority, they want harsher prison terms for drug offenses. These are those people that are uh, adversely affected. Maybe they're staying in the suburbs and their little son, Johnny, is strung out on fentanyl and he crashed the car. And now they want prison terms extended for the person that sold little Johnny the drugs. Now, with that being said, only 20% support a 10-year minimum sentence for drug couriers or mules, the people that deliver the drugs. But it was an interesting case a couple of weeks ago. It was one of the stars. I can't remember who it was. I think it was the dude Joey, or one of the guys from Friends. He died, and it was because he died of a overdose. I definitely need to fact check and see exactly what his name was. It was one of the friends, stars friend. I can't even. Was it LeBlanc? All right, just let me know. But anyway, he died because of an overdose. Did you know that they were going to charge the drug dealer for murder because he sold him the drugs? Right? He sold him the drugs. Now, this may sound a little bit controversial, but even Michael Jackson, he died. He was on propofol, right? He had an addiction to propofol. And the doctor, I think his name was Conrad or whatever, they charged him for providing him with the drugs. Now, of course, there was a doctor, and if it was no medical reason, I don't know how that case turned out, but they're charging drug dealers if something happens to the person that they selling the drugs to. They OD or if they die, because you gave them something that poisoned them or made them so high that they went and crashed, or they committed suicide, or they OD'd. So you're responsible for that. Now, the shift in public sentiment has always, and it will always change your policymakers because they want the votes, right? And these policymakers are going to reconsider the application of mandatory minimums and also consider mandatory minimums depending on what type of reform or votes that they need. And these reforms should be aimed at reducing the scope and impact of drugs and their impact on incarceration. So while mandatory minimum sentences were designed to standardize punishments and deter drug-related offenses, evidence suggests that they have contributed to mass incarceration, exacerbated racial disparities, and failed to effectively reduce drug consumption or crime. They don't do anything. A mandatory minimum doesn't do anything. Now, these outcomes have sparked ongoing debates and calls for reform within the criminal justice system. And I'm one of those people that believe that criminal justice reforms are necessary, especially when it comes to mandatory minimums, as we have seen that they are proven not to do anything. They don't do anything, right? We will want them to help, but here's my thing, and I'm just going to just say this because it's very important. I'm a person that sincerely believes in the power of responsibility. If you're listening to this show, either you are formerly incarcerated, you're impacted by something within the justice system, you are, you know what's going on, right? So the whole premise behind the conviction fiction is to highlight those stories and to give you your big ups, to give you your roses, so to speak, when you were out here doing the right thing, when there were challenges, especially because of your past or because you did some time or because you didn't have adequate education. Maybe you grew up in a broken home, led you to prison. You started using drugs while you were in prison, while you're out of prison. And somehow or another, you overcome those odds and now you're living successful. Matter of fact, you're probably giving back to the rest of society or helping people just like you that, you know, went through similar circumstances, right? That's what the whole conviction fiction is about. You can always check out the podcast available streaming live on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts. We're on Spotify. We're also on Amazon Music. So if you just need to hear some encouraging words or you need to hear that, hey, I'm not doing this by myself. Okay. Yeah, sometimes I suffer through the PTSD episodes where I wake up in the middle of the night screaming that I'm locked back up, but I'm doing the right thing while I'm out here. This is the podcast for you. You can also check out my book, The Conviction Fiction, Changing the Narrative of Life with After Lockup. It is available on Amazon Music. We will also be at the second annual Pod Car and Bike Show in Forest Park. Be sure to check the comments for the details. Will be out there. We'll have a couple of books on hand. And I'm encouraging, if you can't even read, bro, just buy a couple of books and I'll hand them out to people that can. All right, just buy a couple of them because it's important to get this message out there that there is life after incarceration. You can change the narrative, right? But back to breaking the cycle. We're talking about drugs recovery and recidivism. It's one of those topics that, like I said, is dear to me. I was, I've used drugs before. I've drunk alcohol, sometimes excessively. And I was able to go through a couple of programs. I do want to share a story, like for one of our listeners. Now, this person's son, Surreal. Her name has been changed to protect, everybody. But Sun Surreal had it all. At least that was what it looked like from the outside. She had a high-ranking position with a local sports team. She had a beautiful home, a marriage, and that by all accounts seemed solid. Now, she and her husband, they were the couple everyone envied. They were successful, attractive, and always the life of the party. But the parties never truly stopped, especially for Surreal. Drinking had always been a part of her life, woven into the fabric of the family story. Her father was an alcoholic. Most of us that are, substance abusers or alcoholics, we have some type of genetic link, whether through a parent or someone that, kind of passed it on to us. So we just felt like, okay, we got to keep this going. Now, Son Surreal's father was an alcoholic. He could barely function without a drink in his hand. And growing up, she had sworn she'd never be like him. Son Surreal swore that she was like, I can't be like this guy. That she wouldn't let alcohol control her. But genetics and environment had a way of whispering lies. Like the one that said that she could handle it. That one that said one more drink wouldn't hurt. It started off like social drinking, then it became a ritual after work, just a way to unwind. But over time, the unwinding became a necessity. And alcohol wasn't just something she enjoyed, it's something she craved. Now, her husband, he drank too, but not like her. He could stop. He could say no. However, Sansaray, she always found an excuse to keep going. So she started lying a little bit, like white lies, like, I'm not drinking that much. I don't know what you're talking about. She would lie about why she was coming home late from work. Then, infidelity started creeping in. She started cheating around because alcohol lowered her inhibitions and clouded her judgment. And it led her into some situations that she never thought she'd find herself in. First, she started going out with like her coworkers. They started having the drinks. Before long, other stuff started happening. Right? Situations she justified to herself in the haze of her intoxication took over. And her husband suspected some stuff. Then he knew. They began arguing all the time. There was always resentment in the building. But they ended up staying together, bound by the years of love, history, and the hope that things would change, but they did not. Right? I think it goes on to say the husband, he started having physical issues because he started ramping up his alcoholic intake due to stuff that was going on with Son Sorrell. Ended up getting high blood pressure, liver issues, eventually diabetic complications that took his eyesight. And while his world went dark, and with it, any hope of salvaging their marriage, he blamed her. And deep down, Son Sorrell knew he was right. And it was a pretty sad story because what had happened, they ended up getting a divorce, and Son Sorrell ended up getting like DUIs, and there was an incident where someone actually got hurt, and she ended up going to prison. So there's some light at the end of the tunnel, because she figured out like the cycle could not continue. It wasn't just a habit. Alcoholism, substance abuse isn't just a habit. It's sometimes referred to a disease, and it's one that can tighten its grip around you before you even realize that you are caught up. Okay, especially if you had it in your blood, in your history of alcoholism and substance abuse has been in your history. You need to be very vigilant when it comes to the throes that alcoholism and substance abuse can put you in. Okay, so that's just a little bit of a story I wanted to share about Son Sorrell. Now, for all due accounts, I think things are better for Son Sorrell. However, that's a true story that can really have an impact on those that realize that, hey, I'm just like Son Sorrell. I had parents that used drugs. I had instances because I was on alcohol or I was doing illicit drugs that I started making bad decisions. Right now, let's go back to the punitive talk. Right, what does punishment do for drug offenses? What does punishment do? The approach for drug offenses, whether punitive or rehabilitative, because there's two type of ways you can do it. You can say like we can get people to stop using drugs or committing drug related offenses by punishing them, or we can stop them by giving them rehab. Right, one of the two. It's going to be one of them. You have to choose one. You have to choose your poison. Now, the way that we go significantly influences outcomes for individuals and communities. Understanding those impacts of these different strategies is very crucial for developing effective policy. So let's look at the punitive part first, right? We focusing on deterrence through law enforcement, incarceration, lock them up. There's that whole get tough on crime deal, right? It's led to increased imprisonment rates for drug-related offenses. However, research indicates that such approaches have limited effectiveness in reducing crime or addressing the root causes of substance abuse. We talked about this. Just because you lock someone up, right? Most times, if they aren't given some type of habilitation, then they're just going to get out even more bitter than they were before. For instance, despite the implementation of drug laws or really strict drug laws, there's been little evidence to suggest that there has been a decrease in drug-related crime rates. Crime rates don't go down because you lock somebody up. They don't. You locked up one drug user or someone that committed crime because of drugs. Guess what? Someone's gonna take their place. Right? It's like the hierarchy of the streets, right? So when it's a drug dealer gets, somebody got to fill the void. It's like any other business. Any other business. If the corner cafe down the street, if it's taken away. It was one of those places where people frequented. They went and got their coffee or got their donuts or got their whatever, their food. And if it shuts down, somebody else gonna take his place. That's the same thing with drug dealers. That's the same thing with drug users. Someone's going to take the place. It's the hierarchy of it all. Now with rehabilitative approaches, people there's this thought that aim to address the underlying issues contributing to drug offenses like addiction, socioeconomic factors. Then you have your treatment programs within the criminal justice system that have shown numbers to decrease. They have actual numbers that show that there has been a decrease in substance abuse and associated criminal behavior. Because if someone goes through a program, these successful programs actually track people that have graduated, things of that nature, right? And you can see if they went back to prison or not. You can see if they are back in drug rehab or they committed some type of drug-related offense. These individuals who participate in comprehensive drug treatment while incarcerated, they show lower rates of relapse and recidivism compared to those who do not receive such interventions. So that's one of my arguments for rehabilitative or habilitative. Let's change that. Habilitative reform, because there are various outcomes. So this is what happens. Like when you talk about the punitive effects and the rehabilitation type of deal, or the habilitation, I got to get that out of my vocabulary. Rehabilitation is actually habilitation with people like us, right? So comparing these two different approaches suggests that rehabilitation can be more effective than punishment in reducing recidivism among drug users. Non-punitive interventions such as voluntary treatment and community service, they have demonstrated greater success in preventing people from reoffending. Right? If you get someone involved, you get them doing something, making sure that they are being active within their own community. It has proven to be a more successful approach to rehabilitating drug offenders. And that's just prisoners in general. Incarcerated people need to get active in the community. Moreover, public opinion increasingly favors habilitation over incarceration. Many crime survivors even advocate for shorter sentences and alternatives like drug treatment and community service. So victims are even advocating for, this. Now, when it comes to policy, all evidence, it shows that rehabilitative programs into citizen policies can lead to better individual outcomes and enhance public safety, because you're focusing on treatment and support rather than solely on punishment. All right, here it is. We're adults now. One of the greatest teacher is pain. The greatest teacher is pain. And I believe that when people are put in painful situations, they're either going to say, hey, I don't really like this, the way I'm feeling or the experience that I'm going through. So I'm going to change because I don't want to be back here again. A lot of times in programs, they call it the rock bottom, right? You reach the rock bottom. Things can't get no worse unless you're up under, right? Up under the dirt. So pain is always the best teacher. But here's the thing. That pain just isn't because you are locked up. That's not your rock bottom. Your rock bottom is dealing with all of that unresolved hurt that you have, all that unresolved trauma that you have. A lot of us walk around all day, man. Well, this is the way I am because of whoop the whoop the whoop. Okay, so that's what we need to start addressing is the whoop the whoop the whoop. Why do I feel like I need to have drugs? Why does it feel like I have to be viewing myself as a good person, even though I'm doing bad things or criminal or illicit things? by focusing on the why, then we can actually become better citizens. We can actually become um, or work towards moving to that successful part that we want to be in. Now, that treatment and support, rather than punishment, it can more effectively address the complexities of substance abuse because it's very complex and it has a plethora of challenges when it comes to substance abuse. That's why we do the things we do, right? I want to talk about this fentanyl thing. It's a synthetic opioid that is significantly more potent than morphine, and it has profoundly impacted our society, influenced public health, cultural expressions. It's all in the music, and it has prompted substantial shifts in government policy because, of course, when it started affecting home, policymakers really want to do something about it, right? This blow up of fentanyl has intensified the opioid crisis, leading to dramatic increases in overdose fatalities. I personally have had people in my life that died because of overdoses of fentanyl. Um, Even the CDC estimated that over 110,000 people in the U.S. died from drug overdoses just last year, and with nearly 70% of these deaths attributed to fentanyl and other synthetic opioids. That was one. What was that? That potpourri stuff. Oh man, now I usually don't talk about my drug use because that was a thing in my past. But I smoked some of that synthetic stuff one time, and I said to myself, "Never again, never again." And it's crazy because I was in prison when I did it. What was it? That was a flocka. It was a drug called flock out. People were eating folks and stuff. Right? And this opioid crisis, man, especially with fentanyl, it's permeated various cultural mediums, particularly music. Um, I want to say 50% back in this was 2018, the top 40 songs in 2018, they referenced drugs, alcohol. 50% of those songs in the top 40 talked about drugs, alcohol. And this just showed us that there has been a significant presence of substance themes in popular music, and it always have been. Oh, we go back gin and juice, smoking on endo. It's so many, especially in rap culture. If you can talk about drugs, then you ain't talking about nothing, right? But he also goes into pop and the weekend. He sings about drugs all the time. While specific mentions of fentanyl are less prevalent, uh, remember all the songs about Molly, right? The broader discourse around opioid use has influenced artists across all genres, leading to more lyrical content that reflects personal struggles. They tell you why I'm doing this. They will tell you in the song why I do this because of the pain. Okay, so we need to start addressing that pain. And in some cases, they glamorize the drug use. And this cultural representation can shape a negative public perception, right? It potentially normalizes substance use. It normalizes it. And then how are we going to normalize substance abuse and conversely highlight the dangers of substance abuse? But we got governments that are doing mandatory minimums. Think about that. We glamorizing this drug use. We're making that part of our popular culture, but folks getting 15, 20 years mandatory for possessing drugs. Or worse than that, you sold drug to somebody, now they dead, now they charging you with murder. Right. So in reaction to this popularization of drug use, governments across the globe have implemented a range of policy aimed at curbing its distribution and mitigating its impact. Most recently, the House of Representatives passed the Halt All Lethal Trafficking of Fentanyl, or the HALT Fentanyl Act, and it classified fentanyl-related substances as Schedule 1 drugs. that have a high potential for abuse and no accepted medical use. This move basically aims to impose stricter controls and penalties across the board when it comes to fentanyl trafficking, right? More mandatory minimums, right? Then we got the harm reduction strategies, wherein if you are caught, um, if you are caught giving drugs away, or selling drugs, and someone dies or is they overdose or whatever, you are responsible if they can say that it was you. They'll prove a case against you. Um, and now they are also giving the reversal agent. Was it Naxaline, Nalacine, where it can prevent overdoses? I think it was a big thing up in New York because they had the kiosk, like a vending machine where you can go get the Nalacine. Hope I pronounced that, but you can go get it out of a kiosk, and a lot of people's like, you're basically saying it's okay to do it. A lot of conservative lawmakers say you're basically saying it's okay to do it. Just go take this and you'll be okay. When others are saying like, hey, this stuff is out of control. More the liberal lawmakers like it's out of control. At least we can save lives by giving them the reversal overdose agent, right? So it's a serious thing, and I want to talk to the conviction fiction family about that, about this topic, because that's like one of the things that we, as individuals that are out here trying to make a difference in our communities and do something right, we want to be sure that you understand the new laws that are out there. We want you to understand that if you haven't dealt with some of the things that led to your incarceration or led to you feeling, it doesn't depend what you did. So I mean, I know it's a lot of people that are wrongfully convicted. I understand that also. But for those that know what you did, you got proven right, even though it was you against him or blah blah blah, you know what happened. If you're living in that truth, then you need to understand how you got to that space. You need to deal with that. You need to deal with that. When don't talk about all this stuff that's going on as well when it comes to dealing like with other countries like Mexico, China. You know, currently we have a president. He's like not carrying his tariffs on everything. He's taxing everything, which could be a good or bad thing. I'm not one to judge, but things are really moving rapidly in order to address the security issues related to fentanyl trafficking and to encourage reciprocal trade practices that consider those drug control measures, which can lead to incarceration. Because one of the things we talk about on the Conviction Fiction podcast is how it's important for you when you are released or if you're out now to have a secure housing, to have meaningful employment. We talk about Maslow's hierarchy of needs. I mean, if you have your basic needs taken care of, your housing, food, you don't have to worry about the lights are on. You can focus more on your next needs, your next set of needs, right? Meaning psychological needs, right? So if you can have those basic needs taken care of, you start focusing on your next set. However, if you don't have your basic set of needs taken care of, then it makes it that much harder to move up. Secure, stable housing, meaningful employment, and social support are critical components in preventing relapse among individuals. It's also important in preventing recidivism. These elements collectively contribute to a supportive environment. If you have employment, if you have housing, you have support, it gives you long-term recovery and decreases the likelihood of returning to substance abuse or being a recidivist. That living environment provides the perfect foundation for individuals to focus on their recovery or focus on getting themselves back on their feet without the added stress of where I'm going to stay. Okay. Housing insecurity is a real thing, especially been locked up for a minute. Most of us, I was fortunate, but a lot of us, when we get out, we won't have nobody to go to. They either died off or they don't deal with us no more. So housing insecurity has been really linked to high rates of relapsing and can, actually promote substance use. Like, hey, I need something to take myself away from here, right? You got supportive housing initiatives like sober living houses. They offer alcohol and drug free environments, really putting the onus on social support and sustaining recovery. Okay, so those kind of things help, man. You got to have suitable housing. You don't have to worry about it, right? Now there are a bunch of things that can stress you out, like the housing and employment. Another one is employment. Not only it offers you financial stability, but it instills a sense of purpose and like self-worth. I can take care of myself, especially when you've been in prison. I know we like to say we taking care of ourselves in prison and stuff, but like, what is it? The three hots and a cot. I mean, all that's provided for you, but you are paying a price for that. But having a sense of purpose and self-worth by having your own money and providing for your own welfare are vital for individuals in the reintegration process. They're vital for people that are in recovery. Okay. There are plenty of programs out there that talk about the positive impact of employment opportunities with support. Right. I want to talk about some of those today. Now, I just want to talk about some of the individuals that I know. Here's a breakdown of successful initiatives that help individuals maintain sobriety and stay out of prison, with the focus on these organizations that I've featured on my podcast. Right, all of these people, they strategize for staying clean and having, getting a good job, getting suits. One more question: they provide suits for people. You can go to a job interview looking halfway decent. These programs not only just address substance abuse, but also mental health, housing, employment, and social support. They also connect individuals with those who have successfully navigated similar challenges, much like what I'm doing here on the Conviction Fiction podcast. And we got others that equip individuals with skills to build a stable and fulfilling life. When we're talking about Teens on Point is one of them. Shakur Cooper, where you can get a trade, a plumbing, you would get an apprenticeship. We also want to focus on coping mechanisms, these groups that I'm about to mention, and strategies for managing triggers and cravings. First one I want to bring up is Breaking the Chains. This organization focuses on providing support and resources to those individuals and families affected by incarceration. Shout out to Jessica Jones in New York, and they are mentorship, life skills training, and assistance with reentry. You can find that at breakingthechains.org. There are other programs. Let's see. We got Ebony Ross Stover with the Dream Builders Foundation, right? She's going to help with practical things like housing and employment, which are crucial for maintaining sobriety and stability. Now, Dream Builders, it's all in the name. They want to empower individuals to achieve their full potential through education, mentorship, and community development. They currently work with some at-risk youth and adults, providing with the tools and support they need to succeed. With Dream Builders, they focus on preventative measures. Right, that's what's important. Like once you know, then you need to work to. If you know something harms you or you know something's not good for you, we need to strengthen those preventative thoughts so that you can avoid involvement with the criminal justice system ever again, right? Or in the first place. with the mentorship programs. Dante Hayes, another a member of the Builders team, they have mentorship programs that can provide crucial support for those struggling with substance abuse or re-entering society. All right. Um, Teens on Point, I've talked about them a couple of times now. This organization works with young people, providing them with positive role models, life skills training, tech training. When you're talking about being plumbers or electricians or carpenters, they have a program that is very well respected. Excuse me. Very well respected and utilized here to get apprenticeships for at-risk youth. One more question with Dr. Travis Barber. Is dedicated to promoting critical thinking and open dialogue about social issues. You can find Dr. Travis Barber down at the courthouse advocating. You can find him at the schools advocating. And he also is great at organizing resources to help people understand the complexities of the issue of sobriety and reentry. Um, let's see who else. Focus 21 Foundation, Dr. Terrence Berry, pretty much in the same vein as the One More Question. I do want to shout out to Next Level Boys Academy. They work with the drug courts. They work with the courts to offer supervision instead of incarceration. They offer treatment instead of incarcerating for nonviolent and violent offenders. They have weekly classes here in Atlanta. I want to give a big shout out um, to Next Level Boys Academy and their team as they work to ensure that people, everybody makes mistakes. Everyone will make a mistake, and for some of the youth, sometimes that mistake can cost them 30, 40 years. You know, I know people locked up in 16 years old, 19 years old, still locked up. And I think with these programs, especially with Next Level Boys Academy, they are working with courts to say, hey, don't send this little young man to prison. Send him over here. Let me work with him, and we'll go from there. You know, and most of the kids over there, they are able to start meaningful lives, either working through teens on point or going to get a trade or going to barbering school or, you know, finding some type of skill where they can actually make money without being out here in the streets. Now, all of these initiatives represent a range of approaches, but they are all aimed at helping individuals build healthy, productive lives and break the cycle of addiction and incarceration. Okay. Now, that's where we're going to leave this episode of the Conviction Fiction. A conversation that unfortunately echoes the experiences of far too many. But it doesn't have to be this way. We are live, and we've seen today how the system often fails those caught in the cycle of addiction and incarceration. But we also heard about the incredible work being done by organizations like Breaking the Chains, Dream Builders, Teens on Point, Focus 21, One More Question, Next Level Boys Academy, Mothers Against Gang Violence. All these organizations are dedicated to breaking the cycle and offering real pathways to recovery and integration. You can be a part of the solution, so we urge you to consider supporting habilitation. Focus policies in your community that helps people learn how to live. You want to advocate for programs that prioritize treatment over punishment, that invest in mental health resources, and that offer genuine second chances. Now, if you're able, please donate to those organizations like the ones we've mentioned today. Every dollar makes a difference in providing crucial support to those on their journey to recovery. And for those of you looking to make a direct impact, consider getting involved in mentorship programs for returning citizens. Start a podcast. Come on my podcast. Your guidance and support can be the lifeline someone needs to rebuild their life. Let's go ahead and work together, man, to create a system that heals rather than punishes. Let's build a future where stories like mine are the rule, not the exception. Thank you for listening, and thanks for being a part of this live change. See you next week.